federal penitentiary ought to be a minimum security one, but like I said, they will want to screw with the leader of a revolution, try to defeat me, to demoralize me, to shut me up. So I will be screwed with in all the places they send me, I would figure. My goals then are to stay healthy and continue writing, survival and expression, do the time. On a 5-year sentence, I could be in prison 4 years, 3 months. The time spent in North Fraser is credited to my U.S. time. By the time I get to the U.S. gulags, it will be 4 years to go. I will put in for a treaty transfer to get back to a Canadian jail, but the Conservatives here hate me for my work and they will stonewall the transfer. I am certainly the least dangerous prisoner ever. After all, there is no victim at all, nor did I profit by any of my so-called crimes. I doubt there are more than a few persons in any U.S. federal penitentiary who can demonstrably show that. Cronies of Conrad Black, for example, were fast-tracked into their treaty transfer back to Canada. David Radler, for example, but all need my supporters to be unrelenting, confronting Conservative MPs at every opportunity about my repatriation. And even if the Conservatives abolish early accelerated parole as is expected, if transferred back to Canada, I could be out on the street in 2 years on day parole. And that's about when I expect to be transferred back. When the Liberals were the government, transfers were automatic in 4 to 6 months after a U.S. penitentiary inductee. Now the average time is 14 to 16 months, and lawsuits are often required to expedite the minister to decide to transfer a prisoner back. I sold the rights to a theatrical movie about me with actors for just $2,000, so I hope my story gets picked up by a production company and gets made at some point. With California on the verge of legalization, having over 500,000 people with legal marijuana access cards, the current prohibition is unsustainable in the U.S. With 14 medical marijuana states, and now Obama's order not to have federal government interfere in state laws, more states will go to medical marijuana. Whether we'll be in time to help me is open to speculation, but the movement has momentum in the western United States, especially California. With that state short $22 billion in revenue this year alone, cannabis taxation and cannabis tourism will bring billions in needed revenue to the state and its taxation. I'm hoping Ron Paul's run for president again will run for president again in 2012 with former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson as his running mate. That is what I would recommend to all my U.S. supporters if President Obama fails to end the marijuana prohibition. Both Ron Paul and Gary Johnson have outstanding credentials on ending the drug war and prohibition, as well as having all the right answers on the economy, the wars abroad, sound money, and economics. Only their ideas and policies will rescue America from the current and worsening malaise that will seize that once proud republic. So I'm optimistic about some things, but it will likely be darker before a revelatory light shines through. Ron Paul will be 77 in the year 2012, but the nation will be ready for him then, and Gary Johnson is his natural intellectual heir. All other Republicans, for example, except perhaps Congressman Jeff Flake, Paul Brune, Tom McClintock, and a few others, appeal to the worst instincts of the American people and are so revolting that whenever I see their slimy, hypocritical Republican comments on TV, I want to like Obama more, despite the president's wrong policies on Iraq, Afghanistan, the drug war, stimulus spending, and my prosecution in particular in the U.S. courts. The books you sent to me, Payback and Skavuvi, didn't come from chapters, but I got them anyway. Lots of books sent to me from Amazon have been rejected and sent back. In here, an inmate is not allowed to have hardcover books, and the rules say new softcover books from chapters only, but I have gotten used books that were from chapters sent to me, and new softcovers from Amazon sent to me, but the only guarantee I will get a book is if it's from chapters.indigo.ca, and that it is a new softcover, because that's what the rules say. I'm sure you will get a refund on any books you send me or sent me that got rejected. I know you sent $147 worth of books, and I really thank you for that consideration, and I'm sorry I didn't get them. Like I say, I'm sure the book company will refund you. I have a list of books and things I'm interested in reading, so if you ever want to send books to me again, and whether it's in a U.S. jail, whether it's CTAC pretrial or a U.S. federal penitentiary that I go to, here's some books I would love to receive, and like I said, softcover only. When I'm in CTAC pretrial or a federal penitentiary, people should go to the Bureau of Prisons website and find out what the rules are. Jody can help if you email her at jody@cannabisculture.com for rules on sending books wherever I may be. Here's some of the books I'd like to read. Ron Paul's book, The Revolution. There are new books out by my favorite author, Ayn Rand, and my great philosophical influence. One's called Goddess of the Market, and there's yet another book out about her. My favorite psychiatrist, or rather anti-psychiatrist, is a guy named Thomas Zotz, whom I recommend to everybody. And I would love to reread his book, Our Right to Drugs, and another wonderful book called Ceremonial Chemistry, and his most famous book called The Myth of Mental Illness. He's great, and he's highly worthwhile, and I've read all three of those books, and I would love to reread them again. I'd love to read a Noam Chomsky reader, or essays by Noam Chomsky. I'd like to reread Malcolm X's speeches and his biography. I would love any more books on Martin Luther King, whether from a biographical point of view or from a leadership analysis point of view. And I enjoy books about the 1960s, so any books that are histories of the 1960s would be welcome. I would like to get histories of the Boer War, the war in South Africa from 1898 to 1901, and a book by Richard Miller Lawrence called Drug Warriors and Their Prey, if it's in softcover. A new book I've only read parts of in photocopy form was The Myth of the Addicted Army by Jeremy Kuzmarov, and I would love to read the whole book. You know, I've really enjoyed these two graphic novels by Alan Moore called Watchmen and Prometheus, so any Alan Moore graphic novels other than those two I would love to get. I'd love to get Doonesbury's cartoons after 2001 to the present. Any books on the history of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement would be welcome, and especially books about my musical heroes like Bob Marley. And if I'm allowed to get hardcover books at some times, I have these great books at home I'd love someone to send me if they ever want to send me a big book that's allowed. It's the Spider-Man Omnibus book and the Silver Surfer Omnibus books. They're all the comic books from those days, reprinted in colors from the 1970s and 60s. I'd love to get a history of the comics, too, and there's many of them out there, and a history of the pulps, too, which are the books from the magazines really from the 30s and 40s about people like the Shadow and Doc Savage and the Phantom and things like that. Great old characters, and I've read many of them in the past. And if anybody wants to send me any copies of The Shadow or Doc Savage by Lamont Cranston, please do. I'd love to read books about Led Zeppelin, and there's one called Hammer of the Gods, which is a biography of them, a book on Pink Floyd, Talking Heads. Jimi Hendrix has a biography called Excuse Me While I Kiss the Sky, and Grateful Dead. I'd like to read some non-fiction novels that are by James Clavell. King Rat, for example. I really loved the book Noble House and Taipan. And I'd like to read non-fiction books, anything by Wade Davies. I haven't read anything by him. He wrote The Serpent and the Rainbow. Any new book by Paul Theroux, that's a travel book, but I've read mostly everything he ever wrote. And the last one I read was Ghost of the Eastern Star. Any new books by Michael O'Hanlon. He's a travel writer, and I've read his book about traveling in the Amazon and traveling in Borneo. I'd like to read a biography of Hunter S. Thompson, and I bet there's a couple of those out, as well as biographies of John Lennon. I know there's a few new ones out recently, too. And biographies of Henry Ford and aspects of his life. So there you go. Those are a few books I'd like to read, my friend. So if you get a chance, those are what I'd love. Please send me any of those things, and I would be so grateful. I would like to ask you if you could perhaps hold a sign out front saying Free Marc Emery in front of the constituency office in Sechelt for your Conservative Member of Parliament, or a variation on that sign, for a few hours on a Saturday when the weather is not too bad. Perhaps even in front of Nicholas Simon's MLA office in Sechelt, too. The British Columbia NDP is totally silent on the marijuana prohibition, and it's disgusting, their silence, despite the BC NDP adopting a resolution in 2006 calling for an end to cannabis prohibition. They never speak up on our behalf. It's particularly galling for Nicholas Simon to remain silent since his partner's been smoking pot for years on a regular